Sure. My name is Marlin Jenkins. I'm the founder and CEO of Neture Incorporated.
And Marlon, how did you hear about Disruptive Technologists and the event tonight?
So I was invited, fortunately. I had an event, well, I wrote a paper, something like that, on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. And Lauren reached out to me and said, look, I think what you're doing is interesting. I'd love to get your involvement in a previous event. And then we spoke, and she asked me about this event, and I told her some of the things we're doing in that space, and here I am.
Nice. Yeah, LinkedIn is it's a great spot, especially in New York. I feel like there's so many meetups and like actual connections you can meet like offline. That's actually how I met Lauren as well. She messaged me on LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I haven't had as much feedback or connection through LinkedIn, but I like to write when I get an opportunity. So that's one of the best places I found to just get the word out, and so I use it.
What was the article about, if you don't mind me asking?
I think the title was "I'm the smartest man in New York City. No one gives a damn."
Okay. Sounds like something Lauren would click on.
It was just me, talking about me being an underrepresented founder and what it's like in New York to kind of have that and not really get much support for it, pretty much.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I work for a lot of startup companies myself, and I love seeing how different CEOs and founders run their business. And it's a struggle the whole way through, mostly.
Absolutely.
And especially in New York, because this is kind of like the center of it. I mean, it's here, and it's also like you have Silicon Valley that we're kind of like neck and neck.
Right.
So what has been we're going to deviate a little bit from like the healthcare topics,
Sure.
but for you being like a founder and CEO, what's the hardest thing you've found about like, your journey and what you're doing?
Right. Well, my business is not a sexy business, I'm told. Even though it has an effect on so many people, there's such a need for it. But so I think from my perspective, the biggest difficulty has been getting people to recognize that it's both viable and meaningful. And because it's not a quote unquote sexy business, there are not a lot of people to talk to about it. Most people want to talk about software or platforms, and broadband is not something that most people want to talk about. And then on top of that, since I'm targeting an underserved population, most people really don't want to talk about it, right? There's not a huge profit margin to be had in dealing with underserved communities. So I think that's been the most difficult thing. And then obviously on top of that, it's just finding collaborative people. That's always been difficult. So that's the hardest part. I mean, oddly enough, outside of New York, California, Atlanta, no problems. I can connect with anybody. In New York, not much.
That's so interesting. I wonder why that is.
I mean, I'm assuming part of it has to do with the fact that there's so many other things to invest in New York. Finance, housing, healthcare, software obviously is a big media. So if you're not in one of those fields, fashion, even food tech is pretty big out here. So if you're not in one of those fields, it's just not something that there's not a lot of people to invest in telecom to begin with. And then on top of that, it's looked at as such a cash-intensive business, which it is to start. So I think it's a combination of all those things. But because in California and Atlanta specifically, there's such a burgeoning market of support for underrepresented founders or social ventures, it's a much more interesting conversation. It's much more collaborative. One of my advisors who is a social venture VC. I met her in California, but she's based in New York. So, it's just a different vibe, and I think that's part of the reason. So all you can do is just work with it and do the best you can, and that's what I'm doing. And just commit. You have to commit. Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
Very nice, yeah. So the topic today, too, we're talking, some of these panelists are founders or they're people that are just really passionate about healthcare and technology and artificial intelligence. Sounds like this might not be something that directly applies to what you're doing, but maybe there's some relation or, interest in it. What does this topic have, that kind of sparks an interest in you being here today?
So when I first started Neture, one of the things we were looking at is what are the different areas that are underserved. So if you're looking at, okay, well, we know there are millions of people that don't have internet access. Okay, what else do they not have because they don't have internet access? So one of the things we talked about was digital health. And we did a lot of work early on in collaborating with local hospitals in the Bronx specifically to get an idea, okay, look, this is happening. We want to find a way to connect you, because right now in New York State, there's this whole thing called Disruptive, which is the delivery service redesign or something like that regarding to Medicaid. So because of those things, there was an opportunity for us to connect with hospitals and healthcare organizations about how to bring those services to underserved communities. That is what sparked my involvement in this, because that's something I'm going to be doing. We have a platform that we designed just for connecting communities to local services, and that's the mechanism we're going to use to connect them to healthcare. So that's why I'm here.
Nice. That's beautiful. And that's such a nice, one of our previous panelists that we spoke to too was talking about how you can have two totally different fields that you would think, well, how is this going to help, what I do, or vice versa. And it's nice that you're like, wait, there is, an underserved market here. And yeah, how can we help people? This is why I love this topic, because this does relate to people.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you want to make sure you can do something that can help the masses. And unfortunately, more times than not, most technology that comes out does not get to this population. So if there's a way you can bridge that gap, then you want to do that, and that's what Neture is for, to bridge some of those gaps.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and learning about what you do. I think what you're doing is wonderful, and I can't wait to see whether you branch out more on the East Coast, the West Coast. Definitely be following your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking with me.
I'm glad to be spoken to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marlin.